We're live, Andrew. We made it to the other side. Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Monday afternoon webinar. And this one is all about Andrew. Andrew Azzopardi from No.12. Thank you for joining us, Andrew. How are you?
Yeah, I'm fine. Yourself or no?
I'm really good. Thank you so much.
Really good to be with you guys.
Yeah, it's amazing. I'm a bit jealous because normally I get to taste all those wines. So normally what I do in workshops, towards 3/4 of the workshop, I sneak in because that's when I know that they're like tasting wine. But like not happening today. Well, let me just quickly go to the chat and say hi, everybody. And obviously it's nice if you would send me some messages back that we know that you're actually alive on the other side. Huh?
Yeah, please do. The more interactive it is, the better.
Yeah, because it's quite strange talking to a screen, because normally we're used to talking to real people. But before, let's get going. So let's we're in ACREW Online now, and what we're going to do today is we're going to have a great session from Andrew. And Andrew is the general manager of No.12, based in Malta. You're at home at the moment, right, Andrew?
I'm at home in Malta at the moment. Beautiful weather, so we're lucky.
Good. Well, the weather in Palma is a bit cloudy, but
yeah,
still, I think we're pretty happy. And in my home country, it's King's Day, so everybody's celebrating today.
So, well, we'll celebrate with a bit of wine here. I was speaking to the Palma office this morning. We had an online meeting as well, and they're all huddled up. It's a little bit fresh there in Palma, isn't it?
It is fresh. It is fresh, but we are not allowed to go out, so we don't really complain.
Yes, of course, but that should be lifted soon, if I'm not mistaken.
2nd of May, I'm allowed to take a walk, and I will. Joanna is also she's hosting all this. She's moderating, so you won't see her, but she's helping out a lot. And we're talking today about wine service and storage, and with a special focus on older and mature vintages. Sounds very interesting. I am not going to take a lot of your time, Andrew. I'll leave it to you. I think it's all you at the moment. So take it away. Do you want me to start your presentation?
No, just a very brief introduction. So just to repeat a little bit what Arno said. So my name is Andrew. I'm general manager of No.12 Fine Wines and Provisions, and I really hope you enjoyed this presentation. It's the first time I'm giving a live masterclass, so please bear with me, be a little bit nice. Secondly, please be interactive. So if you can ask questions, Arno here is going to help me realize that the questions will be popping up. I'm wearing my specs, but hopefully I can see them anyway. So the presentation is going to be split in 2 parts. The first part is going to be an easier PowerPoint presentation, or maybe a little bit more tedious, the more boring side of it, just so that we can discuss a little bit about mature vintages, storage, and service. And then the second part of the presentation, I'm going to put myself on the line over here. I'm going to open 1 or 2 of these mature vintages. Hopefully it will go as planned, or better still, if it doesn't go as planned, we'll see how I'll react to opening a very old bottle of wine that would give me trouble, and that's the whole point of this presentation. So fire away, Arno. Start with the presentation.
Let's do that. I'm gonna get you the first slide going, and then you can take it from there.
Voila. So wine storage and provenance. I wanted to start off with provenance, actually. So provenance is where you buy your wine from. And why is provenance important? Provenance is important because you want to know where your wine was being stored. You want to know what temperature your wine was being stored, whether your wine is real wine or fake wine. We all know that there are a lot of fake wines on the market. Especially in our industry, we buy a lot of these really expensive wines, these super premium wines, 1,000 euros a bottle, 5,000 euros a bottle. So obviously that gives a lot of incentive to scam artists in scamming bottles of wine. So then we would buy them at 1,000, 2,000 euros. They've made a nice big buck off us, and it's actually not the wine we think we're buying. So that's one reason. And second reason is a lot of people store their wine really badly. So the little shop round the corner that has a €1,000 bottle of wine stored and exposed to the sunlight, say in the shop window, is not really doing it much good. So it's being affected by the elements. So you should know where you get your wine from. When you're buying non-vintage champagne, for example, non-vintage champagne should be drunk, if possible, within the first 2, 3, 4 years of purchase. Now, if your provider has kept this non-vintage champagne for the past 8 years, you're buying something that's definitely not as fresh as it should be. So it's really important to know where you buy your wine from for these reasons. Storage. So once you buy the wine, then you are now responsible for the storage of the wine. And the most important is temperature. So you've got to keep the wine cool, but not too cool. There's a certain temperature. The perfect temperature is between 12 degrees and around 15 degrees Celsius. Now, I know it's not easy to store wine between those temperatures on a boat. I know there are a few of the larger boats that have wine cubs or wine cabinets or proper inbuilt wine storage cabinets. Others aren't so lucky, so they've got to store them under the stairs or in the engine room. No, I'm joking. Please don't store your wines in the engine room. I've heard some really, really scary stories of where wines are being stored. So I mentioned the engine room for the simple reason that in the engine room, it is really hot. And there's absolutely no way that your wine is going to remain good if it's stored so close to the heat. If it's stored in the bilges, that's another one. So, for example, next would be keep it steady, especially if you're on a sailing boat. Try and keep the wine in the center of the boat, maybe somewhere close to where the mast is situated, so somewhere in the middle. Yeah. So if you've got especially mature vintages, the older vintages, they've got a lot of sediment. Now, if you keep shaking the bottle, the sediment is going to cloud up the wine, and then you're going to have a problem when you drink it. It's a real pity because it doesn't actually spoil the wine, but you can't drink it because the sediment is everywhere. Turn off the light. I mentioned this with the Providence. So if you've got a lot of hot light, that light emits heat, and the heat is going to spoil the wine. So you can have a temperature controlled room at say 12, 13 degrees, but if you've got a light with heat emitting diode, so if your light does actually produce heat, then it's going to be heating up the bottle. Most of the wine cabinets nowadays, like the one you see in the picture in the presentation, which I chose specifically, has non-heat emitting light. So that light has a special diode so that it doesn't emit heat with the light. The next is don't stress the humidity, meaning it needs to be humid, but not too humid. Now I'll explain a little bit why. If it's too dry, so there isn't enough humidity, which probably you will not have that problem on board. But if it's too dry, then the cork is going to dry out. Once the cork dries out, it shrinks and the wine is going to get oxidized. That's if it's too dry. If it's too humid, which I would still prefer to too dry, if it's too humid, you're going to probably spoil the labels and you're going to have mold growing all over the wine. With regards to actually spoiling the wine, there's mixed feelings and mixed thoughts about that. The best would be to keep it around 60% humidity. Obviously, again, on a boat, I can understand, but let's not keep it in the bilges. That's where it's going to be a little bit too wet, isn't it? So see things sideways. What I mean by see things sideways, we like to keep the wine not upright as they are over there, but lying down. The reason for keeping them lying down is so that the wine is always in contact with the cork. And once it's always in contact with the cork, it keeps the cork wet, it keeps the cork moist, and it shouldn't dry out, assuming that the temperature and the humidity of the surrounding environment is as it should be. If it's a screw cap, technically, it probably doesn't need to be sideways. So if you've got your storage that can, for example, hold 60 bottles of wine, but you have 70 bottles of wine, of which 10 are screw cap, then it's an easy choice which ones to put standing up. And I would put the screw cap standing up. Again, not a whole lot of shaking, so keep it steady, right? So try not to move the wine much. Don't keep moving them from one cellar to another and back to the cellar to your cabin and back there. So try and keep the bottles as still as possible. Usually the more mature vintages need to be handled with more care than the younger vintages. So it's a bit like a person. If a younger person gets knocked about, it's not too bad. But once we start aging, then we're a little bit more delicate. Same with wine. So at the end of the day, where shall I store it on board? Again, I understand that it is really difficult. I understand that you need to find the best area. I suggest one, somewhere central, to easy access, because when the guest says, I want this bottle of wine, and he's halfway through dinner, the last thing you want is to be removing a lot of clutter to get to the wine, and then you can't find the wine, and then it was in another storage place. So try and keep it somewhere out of clutter. I would also see if you can label and know exactly where the wines are placed. I would not keep them close to anything that's hot or warm, like the engine room. Make sure you don't keep them there. And I would look for a place that's easy access as well, besides the clutter. Otherwise, what I can suggest, and I know a lot of boats do this, is keep the wines on board that you know or you think will be drunk in that season. So if the guests usually go through, for example, 100 bottles of wine, say keep 100 and 150, keep a little bit of a buffer on board, and then replenish as the season goes along, or store the remaining wines with your supplier or provider, or find a storage place on land, and then they can replenish whenever you need, especially for the older vintages. And like that, they're not constantly being moved on board. I know quite a few boats that have, for example, 1985 Bordeaux still on the boat, and they've been there for a good 6-7 years. I would probably put them I'd probably put them somewhere on land where they can age gracefully without being knocked about.
Hey Andrew, this is Onno in the back end. It's like Emma's asking, from what year onwards would wine be considered a vintage?
What would I consider a vintage?
From which year onwards?
Okay, that's actually a super question, a very good question. It depends, unfortunately. It depends on the wine itself. So generally speaking, Bordeaux, I'm going to start with Bordeaux and Burgundy because they are usually the go-to wines. Okay, most of these wines are quite powerful. So the peak drinking time is 10 to 15 years. That is usually peak drinking. 10 to 15 years is already a mature vintage, but it's at peak. Anything past 10 to 15 years, then sediment really starts to accumulate. So I would say anything younger than 8 years, you should be pretty okay for a Bordeaux or something that's powerful. Anything past 8 years, I would start taking more care. But it's a little bit difficult to pinpoint an exact year. I would probably say around 8 years, start looking after the bottles a little bit more. 10 to 15 years, peak drinking. And after 15 years, then you really need to start taking care because of the sediment. Good. I hope I've answered the question. So if you've got more queries, please go ahead. So with regards to the serving temperature, so we said that we're going to store the wine, be it white wine, sparkling wine, or red wine, or rosé wine. We're going to store them all at the same temperature, and that's between, as I said before, 12 to 15 degrees. Don't stress too much on the temperature. If the temperature goes up to say 17, 18 degrees, it's not going to destroy your wine. So let's get that out of the way. What is worse is when there's a lot of temperature changes. So if it's stored at, for example, 12 degrees, and then all of a sudden there's an influx of heat for whatever reason, and it's gone up to 30 degrees, and then goes back down to 12 degrees, then that's the worst thing that can happen to wine. So we'll try and keep it as stable as possible. Now, when we come to serve the wine, it doesn't necessarily need to be at the storage temperature. So what we do is when it's especially light wine, dry wine, rosé wine, or sparkling wines, we want to serve them well chilled. And usually well chilled is between 4 6 degrees. There's written 5 degrees, 6 degrees, 7 degrees is not too bad. As long as it's fresh, but you want something, you want your wine to be cool. You want your wine to be very refreshing. You want the fruit flavors to come out. If it's a full-bodied white wine, so we're speaking full-bodied white wines such as Chardonnays, Burgundies, Chenin Blanc, then you'd want to serve it at a slightly warmer temperature, so between 10 to 15 degrees, and that would be around about what the storage temperature is, so you can probably get them straight out of the storage. And why do we do this? Do you have a question or no?
No, thank you.
Okay, so why do we do this? It's because if the wine is too cool, like we go for the dry white wines, then the flavors would be mute, would be killing the flavors. We want to warm it up slightly to around 10-15 degrees so that the secondary and the complex aromas really come out and you really start to taste the secondary and tertiary flavors. And that comes out with a little bit of warmth. If it's too cold, it's going to be just one flavor. Also, light fruity reds. This is something that I'm a huge fan of. Chilling the light fruity reds to a slightly cooler temperature than the other reds, also 10-15 degrees. I would say wines like Beaujolais, for example, a Beaujolais Village would be perfect at that temperature, slightly chilled, especially if you're on a yacht and it's nice and warm outside. That's definitely the perfect temperature. You don't want it too hot. Plus, these light fruity reds, you want the fruit flavors, the fruit components to come out, so you want to chill them in the same way as the whites. Now, the full-bodied red can go an even warmer temperature, and that's usually room temperature. Now, room temperature is not the room temperature you would have on the sun deck. That's not room temperature. That's out in the sun where it's really, really hot. So the best temperature for that is between 15 to 18 degrees Celsius. However, I'd like to add something over here, and this is something just through my experience. So technically, yes, it's 15 to 18 degrees Celsius. However, I find when I am in a really warm environment, so if I'm on the sun deck, having my lunch, and it's really hot outside, and you get me a wine that's 18 degrees Celsius, I am probably going to feel it still too cool. So I would probably decant it so it warms up a little bit. I'm not saying put it in the sun. What I'm saying is sometimes 18 degrees might still mute the wine because of the temperature difference. This is something that I've realized from experience. The next and most important thing is select the wine pre-dinner as much as possible. So let's be prepared. So when we're serving wine, let's not leave everything to the last minute. Have the wine that you want to serve, maybe a secondary wine just in case, but always be as prepared as possible. Again, obviously, if your wine is in a storage place where there's a lot of clutter, this is even more important. Now, what happens, we've all been there, when the guest says, I want that wine, and it's either still in storage, so it hasn't been cooled down enough, or it's in storage as well and it's too cold, like you want a full-bodied red wine or port. So if you want to cool it down, my favorite suggestion is wrap it in a cloth, just a plain white cloth, a normal, even a dishcloth, wet the cloth, and then put it either in the freezer or an ice bucket, which is better because you can get it out to table straight away. Wrap it in this ice bucket and cloth, and chill away, and it should chill much faster. If you also put a little bit of salt in the ice bucket, it helps to keep it cooler. If, on the other hand, the wine is too cold, then I suggest decanting it. And once you decant it, it will start warming up in the decanter. So go to the next slide. Another really, really common question over here. Guys, if you have any questions, please go ahead and ask. What I did today was actually I got out a few wine glasses myself, so I can show you, not just from the presentation. So these are the selection of wine glasses that most or many sommeliers actually go for. Now, if I own the boat, or if I don't know of any boat that has all the wine glasses, so we're probably going to have to choose the best or the most adaptable wine glasses for the usual wines, let's put it this way. So generally speaking, if I had to choose one glass, I would choose either the Zinfandel glass or the Bordeaux glass. Those are the two common wine glasses. It is important that the wine glass you have has that shape. That is the most important. However, if you do know that the owner or the charter guest, for example, is really into Chardonnay, big, bold, or Burgundies or American Chardonnays, then I think it would be a really lovely gesture to get a typical Chardonnay glass, which is like this, just over here. So it's a big, wide bowl, and that brings out the aromas of Chardonnay, and also the acid of the Chardonnay is lifted. Also, another wine glass which I think is really important is the Pinot Noir glass, and this is a bit of a tulip shape, as you can see. I don't know if you can see in the video, and this helps to release the aromas of Pinot Noir especially. So these two glasses are not the most important, but they're also really nice to have. The last glass, which I'm a huge fan of, is sparkling wines. Now, sparkling wines I know are really popular on board super yachts, but I'm not a fan, and most sommeliers now have come to this conclusion of tulip glasses. The reason behind this is that actually champagne originally was served in a coupe, more similar to the Chardonnay glass. They used to call it the Coupe de Marie Antoinette. And then eventually what happened was, back in the Renaissance, in the times of the theatre, especially in the UK, they found that these type of glasses, the champagne was spilling. So they used to have a lot of social events, and the champagne used to spill over when people used to talk. So then they invented the flute. And the flute was done purposely so people don't spill their champagne or sparkling wine. However, we've come to realize that the flute actually doesn't do much justice to the sparkling wine. Unfortunately, the bubbles just keep effervescing into thin air, and you cannot actually get the aromas of especially champagne, which is the most beautiful brioche bread aromas. So people have to come up with a wine glass that is, sorry, a champagne glass that is more similar to a wine glass. I don't know if you can see it in the video, you can see it in the presentation, but basically over here it's a little bit more tulip shaped. Okay, if you don't have a proper champagne glass, obviously a tulip glass will suffice, but somebody like me, I would prefer having it in a wine glass, but that is just a matter of opinion. So obviously if the guest still wants a flute, he's the boss. So go to the next slide. Table setting. This is going to be probably the shortest slide. I'm not going to go into the actual setting of the plates and the cutlery. You probably know more than me anyway. All I just wanted to mention were the glassware. So the glasses, it's important that, as you can notice, the glasses themselves are of different heights. When laying the table, tier them, always going up. So leave them tiered like stairs. For the simple reason, the reason behind this, as you can see in the presentation, they're stepped. The reason behind this is so that when you are actually serving the wine, you don't knock it. So obviously if you've got a high glass at the beginning and then a lower glass behind it, then to actually pour into the lower glass is going to be really difficult. So it's just a matter of ergonomics, just making it simple. Also, just to note, the only wine that should be served from the left-hand side of the guest, so as you can see, the wine is always on the right. When you're eating, it's always on the right. It's port. Port would be served on the left. And obviously, I don't need to explain why port is served from the left, because everybody knows that port actually means left on board the yacht. So that's it should be an easy one to remember. We can go to the next slide again. Voila. So when you're serving wines, which wine should you serve first? Obviously, one depends on what you're going to eat. If you're going to start with meat and then go to fish, and the guest wants red wine before white wine, again, he's the boss, and that's fine. There's absolutely nothing wrong with it. But if there is no specific order dictated, then generally speaking, we like to go for the white before the red and the light before the heavy. The reason behind this is that your palate gets tired. So if you start off with something that's very bold and powerful, and then you work onto something lighter, then you don't enjoy the lighter one as much, because your palate would have been knocked around already by the heavier or the bolder red wine. I would also go for the dry before sweet. Again, that is for the same reason. And the last one, which in my opinion is probably the most important one, the better wines before the lesser wines. And the reason behind this is because your palate does in fact get tired. So I would prefer enjoying a really expensive wine or a super premium wine now when my palate is ready for it and my palate is still fresh. Then after drinking 2-3 bottles of wine and I'm tired, and by tomorrow I would have forgotten I drank that really super premium wine. That is the main reason behind it. Oh no, have you heard of any questions yet? Has everybody?
Well, we had a private question of someone who says like the storage of old bottles, but you said it in the beginning. So I tried to give the answer looking back to your slides, but we might want to repeat it at the end. But so far, I think he's doing well. Anybody in the chat, any tips for Andrew? Because I think he is...
It's always good to get a little bit of feedback, see if I'm speaking too fast, maybe, or you're hearing me well. That's also really important.
No, I think you're doing excellent, so don't worry. I mean, it's strange, right, doing this on video.
Yeah, it's really strange talking to myself.
Keep going. You're doing great.
I think I'm doing really well, let's face it. So when do we decant wines, and more importantly, why do we decant a wine? There are actually 2 reasons why we decant a wine. The first reason is to separate the sediment. So this is usually for the more mature vintages. So if we've got a wine that's 10, 15, 20 years old and plus, it would accumulate a lot of sediment, and you want to remove the sediment so that people drinking the wine won't have the sediment in their mouth. And that's why we plant it.
Yeah. I got a question for Josepha. She said just a quick one. What about using a martini glass, well, margarita glass for champagne?
I think it's a really cool idea. Looks snazzy, but it doesn't do it justice for exactly the same reason as the coupe. It's a really cool glass, honestly. And you're walking onto a super yacht and seeing people with these beautiful martini glasses is actually really funky. But it doesn't do justice to the champagne. So if I was drinking a really nice champagne, I wouldn't be too happy about the glass. If it's, for example, maybe a cheaper or an entry-level Prosecco, hey, why not? Then it's a fun party. Great. I don't think anybody's going to say anything about that. So again, maybe it depends on the price or the quality of the wine. More importantly, more than price, it's the quality. So if it's a really good quality sparkling wine or cava, then I would go for a proper champagne glass or wine glass. If it's not, if it's an entry level, hey, why not? Then we can enjoy ourselves, have a party in a margarita glass. Why not?
Okay. And I have one more, but maybe you're going to do that at the end. And so Elena says that a lot of her bottles are old, and when they're open, the cork is broken.
Yes.
Are you going to come back to that later, or is that?
This is exactly what this presentation is about. I have a few bottles over here. Hopefully, one of the cork breaks, and we'll see how to do it. That's the whole point. So basically, what happens when the cork breaks, and how do you react to it? So this is what I'm going to be doing in the actual service. If the cork doesn't break for me, I'll have to explain it.
Good. Let's get back to your presentation, and then Josepha, thank you for your comment. We're back to more glass questions. Your glasses, although you thought was a short topic, it's going to be a longer topic. Galina asked, do you also, in the different shapes of the wine glasses, do you also require different quantities of wine?
Do you require different
quantities of wine in the per glass? Yeah.
Okay. Oh, that's actually a very good question. Okay. So let's get these 2 glasses here. I don't know if you can see them. They're very different sizes. The probability is when I'm going to be pouring wine in the glass, and I will pour some wine later, the probability is that I'm going to be pouring different amounts in the glass because of the size of the glass. The reason is, generally speaking, we stop pouring the wine once it reaches the outermost part of the glass. So if you may say there, So I would probably stop pouring my wine somewhere around here, and I would stop pouring the wine in this glass somewhere around here. So on the outermost, that gives you ample room. Yep, that gives you ample room for the aromas to aerate, to get in touch with the oxygen, and also gives you ample room to swirl the glass. So if you pour the wine up to here, then you're not going to have all that room for the exposure of the wine to the oxygen, and also it's going to be very difficult to swirl the glass. I'd say in all of them, in all these glasses, I would pour till the outermost shape. This one is probably the most difficult, but it's also the widest. So again, keep it quite low. The Cabernet as well, and also the champagne glass. Yeah, so I would pour always around this much wine in each glass. Also, the second reason why we don't pour too much wine in the glass, especially if you're on the sun deck, is that by the time, if you pour it in there, for example, by the time you reach here, the glass, the wine is warm. So you want to keep the wine as cool as possible. So you only pour a little bit, the person can drink it, enjoy it at the optimum temperature, and then we'll pour more. So I hope I answered your question over there. So going back to the presentation, 2 reasons to decant the wine. One is to separate the sediment, which I've already explained. And when you separate the sediment, it means that you leave the sediment. When you decant it, you leave the sediment at the bottom of the bottle, and the rest is poured into the decanter, and that's how you separate it. The second reason is to aerate the wine, and that is so that you get the molecules in touch with the wine, so that you can get the best flavors out of the wine, so that the flavors are in touch with the oxygen and released to their full potential. So you keep aerating the wine. Now you especially want to aerate a young wine, and that reason is, it's a bit like what happens is when the molecules are in touch with oxygen, there is a natural reaction to the molecules, to the wine molecules. Trying to keep this not too scientific. So what happens is the wine molecules are in touch with the oxygen, and just as when metal is in touch with, for example, water and it rusts, the molecules would rust. Or if you get an apple and you knock it and you bruise it and it turns brown, it's exactly the same thing. So what happens is when it's in touch with the oxygen, the composition of the molecules change. What happens is the flavors change as well because the composition changes. Now, what happens is we actually tend to enjoy these flavors. So when the wine is in touch with the oxygen, the flavors are more secondary, tertiary, a little bit more different to just fruit. So you get other flavors and aromas, especially from oxygenating the wine, till it reaches a certain level. Once you reach this certain level, then the flavors start overpowering. So the molecules, then it's like rusting. You get a little bit of rust and you can wipe it off. And then when it's too much rust, it's just over the top. And it's exactly the same with wine. Once it reaches a certain level, the secondary aromas and the tertiary aromas are just too much. They overpower the fruit. And then the last step is that it turns into vinegar. So we're always hoping that's when, before we open a bottle of wine, we always hope that the wine is at the peak of this oxygenation. Now, if the wine is too young, decanting it will help to get the oxygen in touch with these molecules to get the best out of the wine. So especially really, really young wines, decant them. For example, if you've got Bordeaux wine that is younger than 10 to 15 years, sure, decant it for 2 hours before lunch or before dinner and leave it there in the decanter, oxygenating, getting in touch with the oxygen. There is also a school of wineries that like to oxygenate wine using a blender. I don't suggest it. Do I think it will destroy the wine? Probably not. But I just think it's a sin. I can't do that to a bottle of wine. But technically, the reasoning behind it makes sense. So you are actually oxygenating the wine. Also, a reason why we're always swirling the glass in the wine. We're getting into touch with the oxygen. Okay, we'll do that a little bit later as well.
I have another question, Andrew, if I may. Yeah, again, from the chat. Galene again is like, any personal tips, tricks about decanter care?
About?
decanter?
Yes. Yes. So a decanter, technically, so this is the decanter I have for you guys. This is a pretty normal run-of-the-mill wine decanter. Technically, a decanter can be any receptacle, any jug. So if you've got a water jug, normal glass water jug, that can be a decanter, because at the end of the day, the purpose of the decanter is to aerate the wine. That is the sole purpose of the decanter. Now, whether it looks snazzy or cool or has colors or funky or looking like a swan, does it really make such a huge difference? No, besides looking beautiful on the table. So if you just get a jug of water and put the wine in it, that's fine. However, with regards to the maturity of the wine, when the wine is young, I would suggest a decanter which is wide bottomed. So the wider the bottom, the younger the vintage. And that reason is so that there's more area of the wine in touch with the oxygen. So that makes sense. When it's a really old vintage, so say you've got a 1975 Super Tuscan, then you can get a decanter that's a little bit smaller, a little bit of a slimmer decanter, so that there's less touch or less wine actually in touch with the oxygen. So what decanter you use doesn't really make a difference. My only suggestion or tip is, if it's an old vintage, I would go for a wider decanter. Sorry, if it's an old vintage, I would go for a slim decanter. And if it's a younger vintage, I would go for a wider decanter. Otherwise, which decanter you use is fine. If you don't have a decanter, use a water jug, use your glass and pour one glass into another. It's all about aerating the wine. Aerating the wine at the end of the day.
And how do you care about your decanter? I think that's part of Galina's question as well.
How do you care for it?
Yeah.
That's a very good question. So there are special crystals that you can put in to keep the decanter warm, that keep the decanter clean. Sorry, I like to use warm water. Some people use a little bit of vinegar, but I'm not too fond of that because of the taste. You can, if you don't wash it well. My recommendation is don't use soap. I would just use a little bit of warm water and maybe a brush. There are special decanter brushes that you can put in and swirl it around to clean the wine. Also, I suggest that straight after lunch or dinner, especially if it's a white wine, to actually rinse them straight away and scrub them immediately, because they do get stained. And my one at home is not perfect. Yeah, oops. It's probably because I left it overnight after a boozy dinner. So I hope I answered your question over there. Now, when we're going to open a mature vintage, most important is get prepared. Even if you don't really know what you are doing, pretend you know what you are doing. If you have everything out, then whatever happens, you're going to have the solution to solving it. So if the cork breaks, instead of just panicking, putting the bottle down, rushing inside to see how you're going to get the cork out, you have all your equipment there to help you get the cork out. Now, if you don't use it, fine. But at least it's there, so you're well prepared. First, waiter's friend. This is my favorite opener to open wine. Simple, not much bling about it, I know, but it gets the job done. There are also some really cool ones that use pressure to open up. Those are really cool as well if you know how to use them. It can get a little bit complicated. The second one is called an Azzo. Yeah, very, very strange name. And that is the picture on the right of your screen with the two prongs going down. And that is especially good for getting out those wines that are extremely mature and have the cork that is probably breaking. That is actually a really good wine opener. So you start pushing it in and twirling it into the bottle, and using those two prongs, they get in between the cork and the bottle, unsticking the cork from the bottle, because that is why the wine usually breaks, because what happens is the cork gets stuck to the bottle. So when you come to pull it out, the cork remains on the side and the corkscrew itself doesn't come out. Now, because you've got those two prongs, once you're twirling it, it's unsticking the cork from the bottle and helps you get the cork out without noise, hopefully. Then decanter of your choice. As I said before, if it's a mature vintage, I would go for a slimmer decanter, a serviette or a cloth, and that's just basically to wipe away any dirt, mold, pieces of cap or sediment to make it nice and clean. Then a cheesecloth or a strainer. I've chosen a strainer. And this happens is, this is the reason behind me choosing a strainer, is if the cork breaks and there's no way of me getting it out, I can plonk the strainer. I can plonk the strainer on the decanter and pour away. And Bob's your uncle. Candle and lighter. This is if there isn't this is used mainly if there isn't sufficient light, or if you want to make it look all cool and bling. So the reason behind the candle and the lighter, the reason behind it is actually, I have a candle over here and we'll use it a little bit later, is just so that you can shed light onto the bottle using the candle, so that you know that as soon as the wine starts getting cloudy, then there's sediment and you can stop pouring. That is the only reason of using the candle. It's just to shed light on the bottle so that you know when there's the sediment and you can stop pouring. I also added another one, and that is an option B wine, especially if you're going for an older vintage. The chances are much higher that it's oxidized or cooked or just past its best or bad, and the guest would want another wine. So even if there are only 2 or 4 people, then I would get a second wine of the same wine, of course. And then I would also get an option B wine. So if the first wine is not good, they go for the second wine. Still not good, they might probably want to change wine. Get that ready. Don't start scrambling around the aisle going, oh no, we need to give them another wine because they're both cooked.
I got a question from Joanna. And so what are your thoughts for the cloth tie?
I have absolutely no problems with the cloth tie. I think it's actually really cool. And what's good about it is when you have the cloth tie, if the wine drips, it's taken off with the cloth. So I have absolutely no problems with it. I think it's a great invention, and I would go ahead and use it. Absolutely.
And then we're going back to the decanter because Galina is suggesting, would you use small washing bowls to clean the decanter?
Which bowls again?
Washing bowls.
Washing bowls. There are specific washing bowls for decanters. Those are the crystals that I was mentioning. They're called washing bowls. Yes, I think they're great, and they do actually manage to clean the decanter pretty well. So yes, definitely. As long as these washing bowls don't have or don't release any oils or soaps or anything. As long as they don't release anything, then that's fine. It's because you don't want the inside of the decanter to have any soap or oil and anything that's going to interfere with the wine.
Well, that's a good tip. Good, I'll leave you to the presentation.
So, just came to mind now. There are also these contraptions, if you want to call them, called drop stops. They're very popular. It's basically, all it is a ring, a circle, so a piece of aluminium. It's like an aluminium foil, and it's usually circular. And what they do is they roll it. So they roll it up kind of like this in a circle, and then they plonk it inside the bottle to help you pour it. And like that, it stops any dripping from the bottle when you're pouring directly into a glass. Because when you're pouring from the bottle directly into a glass, then it's a little bit difficult. And what happens is you often get the spill. So when you actually pour the wine and then you lift up, you often get drops and you stain the tablecloth. With a drop stop, and you pour and you lift up, you will not get the drips. Otherwise, if you don't have a drop stop, what I would do is pour and then do a little bit of a twist. And that hopefully stops the dripping onto the tablecloth. Yeah, good. Oh no? Okay, voila. Shall we go to the next slide? Oh yeah, so Shall we start? I think we can do it. So first thing, when you have a really mature vintage, I would leave it upright, if possible, for around 24 hours. And the reason behind that is so that the sediment will start going down to the bottom of the wine. And you will avoid all the cloudiness. If you get the wine from the cellar which has been at the side for 5, 6, 10, 15 years, suddenly, you know, bring it upright, open and start pouring, then it's going to be all cloudy with sediment. So if you try and keep them upright for around 24 hours, it would help a lot. I know it's not easy, but if you manage, it would help, especially on the really mature vintages. So locate a decanter, make sure it's nice and clean and polished. Remove the capsule and the cork. I'm just going to go through this and then I'll do it myself. Remove the capsule and the cork. Wipe the bottle of the neck clean. So that's why we have the cloth over here. There we go. Now, whether we actually wipe the wine down itself or not from the dust, you can see it's actually pretty dusty. That's just a matter of personal preference. My suggestion is when you actually show it to the guest, show it to him in all its glory and dust, and then clean it in front of him or her. Okay? And then we can pour the wine into the decanter and we can probably start. Shall we remove the presentation or no, so I can work it out?
Let's go for it. Yeah, let's go for it. And I've got one question whilst you're preparing. Joanna's asking, do you recommend to leave the bottle cork on the table facing the bust or the main guests?
I have no problem with that. I think it's a good idea. Actually, I would suggest it, or at least if the cork is intact, offer it to the guest or just leave it at the side of the table, for the simple reason that there are a few people that like to keep the cork as a souvenir. So yeah, why not? I have absolutely no problem with that. Okay, so we've got the wine, we've got the decanter. There we go. We can light the candle straight away. We'll just give it a little bit of bling. Move these away. And I'm going to choose Chateau, can you see? Chateau Virlade from Grave. So it's a Bordeaux and it's a 1996. So it's got quite a few years on it. And I'm pretty sure that it has quite a bit of sediment. Now, just looking at the bottle, you can already tell quite a bit about the condition of the wine. So, for example, over here, the cork is intact, it's straight, it's flat, it's not pushing out. So the chances are that the temperature that this wine was stored at was good. The second thing is the ullage or ullage, which is the level of the wine. Where is the level of the wine in the bottle? Now over here, the level of the wine is still in the neck. So I would say over here, it's low to mid neck. Now, if the wine had problems, being a 1996, if it was lower than the neck, down in the shoulder, over here, then the chances are that the wine is probably oxidized because there's been too much evaporation of the wine or leakage of the wine. We wouldn't know. But it's normal that the wine decreases in level with the age, but it also depends on the age of the wine. So I wouldn't expect a 1996 to be down here, but if it was a 1950 and it's down here, then it could potentially still be good as well. Okay, so I already know that the chances are that the wine is pretty much intact. So it seems like it's been stored well. When we come to open the wine, I open the wine at the bottom of the lip over here, not at the top, at the bottom. The reason for that is so that we don't have any debris and we don't have the pieces of the foil falling into the wine. We'll try and be delicate with the wine, so don't keep twisting and turning the wine everywhere. There are also those They're actually really cool. These special contraptions that you just twist and turn around the wine, pull up, and you actually take it off. I don't have one here, unfortunately. If it's too much of a hassle to actually take off this foil just from the bottom of the lip, you can take off the whole cap. That's fine as well. That's not a problem at all. So if you see that this starts giving you problems to take it off as well, then you can take off the whole cap. So this didn't give me any problems. Then again, we'll use the cloth. Just make sure it's nice and clean. And now the moment of truth.
What do you think, Andrew?
I think from the way the corkscrew, the waiter's friend, is going down into the cork, I think it's not going to be so hard after all. But you never know. So push it right in. You can see I'm not twisting and turning the bottom, keeping it very, very, looking after the bottom to know the bottom. And then we'll start pushing it up slowly. Don't jerk it, because don't forget the cork has been in the bottle for 20 odd years. And then slowly does it. Yeah. And then we'll just the last bit, if it's intact, keep pushing it up. So keep pushing it up like that. And if possible, without a pop. So we're trying not to pop the wine. Now, we actually managed. So the cork came out perfectly intact. Maybe we'll try and open another one and destroy the cork on purpose. Now, from the cork, a lot of people mention, if I smell the cork, or would I know if the wine is good? I'm not much of a fan of smelling the cork, because mainly you get the smell of cork. But that's my opinion. But what you can tell from the cork is the level of the wine. So it's a 1996, and the level of the cork, the level of the wine, red wine on the cork is still very low. I can show you over here. It's just still here, which again probably means that the wine is fine to drink. If you see that the wine, the level of the red from the wine goes all the way up to the cork, to the very top, then it's a riskier business. It doesn't mean it's bad, but the chances are that it's probably being cooked. So it's being exposed to too much heat. Okay. Now, the next bit, again, we'll clean the cap, the top of the wine, take off any debris, any cork, any remnants from the wine. And then we can start pouring the wine into the decanter. What we'll do is, hopefully, can you see like this or no? Is it good?
Yeah, not completely. So you have to give a bit of explanation with it.
Okay. Let me see if I can come a little bit closer. Voilà. It's better like this, I think. Okay. So I'm using the candle. All I'm using the candle for, okay, just so that I can see where the sediment is. So I'm going to lift the decanter, because the candle is a little bit on the high side, and start pouring slowly. All in one swift move. So don't start and stop, if possible, because of the sediment. There we go. And I started seeing a little bit of sediment. And I can put it down. Yeah. And you've got the wine in your decanter there. Yeah. Now, the amount of sediment usually depends on the age of the wine. So the amount of wine that's left in the bottle depends on the age. Usually the older the wine, the more sediment there is. So the more wine you would actually leave in the bottle. I tell you what I'm going to try and do. I want to see if this one, see if this one opens. Yeah, let's open two. So let's see what happens if the cork doesn't come out. So again, underneath the lip. This is also a 1996. This is a Chateau Canon Moet from Canon Fronsac, which is also a left bank Bordeaux. 1996 was actually a spectacular vintage in Bordeaux. Very high tannic, powerful wines, expected to age well as well.
Hey, I'm going to interrupt you for 1 second, Andrew, because I've got some great questions coming in. Are we going to break the cork first?
Yeah, I'm going to see if I can break the cork, actually. Yeah, I did break the cork. Actually, if you want me to be honest. Yeah. Okay, so the cork broke.
Yeah.
Okay. Two things we can do. One is put it in again at an angle. Generally speaking, this works. Okay. So I put it in again at an angle. Yeah, and try my best to get it out. There we go. Pull it out. And it still doesn't work. So now the next thing I can do is push the cork in. I have no other choice. So we either manage to get it out or push the cork in. If the cork has fallen in, yeah. So now I'm not going to use the same decanter because I'm obviously not going to mix wines. But then I will just put the strainer and pour the wine through the strainer in exactly the same fashion. The only reason why I'm actually using the strainer is because now the cork is going to come out when I'm pouring the wine into the decanter. So I've got the strainer in hand, the cork broke, nothing much I can do about it. Keep it pushed in. I would also recommend being very careful if you're going to push it in, because if you push it in fast, quickly, it's going to shoot the wine out and you make a bit of a mess and the show.
That's not the idea. I've got a few questions.
Yes.
Do you pour intentionally on the walls of the decanter? Is what Joanna asks.
Yes, I intentionally go onto the walls of the decanter. And the reason for that is just so that you get maximum aeration with the oxygen, maximum exposure to oxygen. So if it just goes in, you have just a line of being aerated. Once it's going round and actually getting all over the decanter, you're aerating it to its maximum.
Great. And then Mira asks you, what do you do with the rest of the wine? Because you obviously didn't pour everything into the decanter. It's a good question.
I'm wondering how she wants me to answer that.
I don't know. Mira, can you suggest how you want him to answer that in the chat?
Okay. So generally speaking, we throw away the bit that's all sediments because there isn't much you can do. Mm-hmm. Now actually over here I left actually way more than I needed to. I could have gone down to here, but I just stopped, to be honest, to make it quicker. But I could have carried on till around here. Now the last bit I wouldn't serve.
Okay.
But you can actually show the guests and say, listen, you know, I've left the last bit in the bottle because of the sediment. If they want it, it's their choice. And then you can go back to the kitchen and take a swig yourself. But it should be all sediment.
I think that was what Mira is referring to. That she said, can I take it and drink it? Yeah.
Yeah, why not?
Yeah, no, it was a serious question. She says that's good to know. And Annette has got a good question as well. As she said, I find hole in the decanter is too heavy for one hand. What do you suggest?
There's absolutely no problem in using 2 hands to pour a decanter. So what you can do is either to pour the decanter. So let's pour some wine. We can either use 2 hands, which I'm a fan of, so using 1 hand in front or 1 at the back to hold the decanter and keep it safe and secure, and 1 hand in front to hold it, like that. Or you can use 1 decanter with your hand just at the back and pour it like this.
Yeah, and I can imagine that especially if you have smaller hands, that's more difficult.
And I think the guests would have to be rather silly for them to have an issue with using 2 hands for the decanter. Absolutely, it should not be a problem using 2 hands, especially when you're trying to pour a little bit at length. Then it's going to be even harder. So I would use 2 hands. If it's even heavier, then see if you can get the glass closer to yourself so that you don't spill.
Okay.
Otherwise, what some people do is they use a station, take the glass to the station, pour it, and then hand it over. But that depends on your style.
Good. Okay, there's some more Q&A, so I'm just pushing forward, Andrew, because there's a lot of questions. And
Yes.
and I think he's referring to the sediment, or you said, like, I cannot pour it. Can you sieve it and then drink it? Can you sieve it and then drink it, the part with the sediment, the part on the bottom that you don't use?
Technically, you can. However, I wouldn't think that the sieve is fine enough. Some people may use a cheesecloth, and if it's a very expensive wine, I don't see any harm in trying it, but keep it separate. Don't pour it in the same decanter. Use a different glass. So maybe if just the last bit is left from the bottle, so you've poured all this into the decanter is left on one side, either get another glass or another decanter, and then pour the last bit into that decanter using a sieve or a cheesecloth, and see if it works. If it does work, or if it works to an extent that it's drinkable, then why not? But I wouldn't put it in the same decanter because you're going to cloud it. Which
one more question is here from Galina. She says, back to the drop stops. Is it a professional trick, or is it for beginners to preview drops? I'm not sure I understand. I think you understand the question, right?
Yes. I don't think it's for beginners. And I was in Bordeaux last February, so just before COVID struck. And I was at some of the top wine producers. I'm speaking Chateau Latour and Chateau Margaux, and they all use drop stops. All of them.
So Galina, go get them. So I don't think it's an issue, right?
Yeah, absolutely not. If they're using drop stops, why can't we? Absolutely. I have no problem with a drop stop either. I think it keeps the table clean. And I think they're professional, they're smart. Yeah, get a drop stop.
Fantastic. Great, and I'm hoping this is great. This is a lot of interaction on the chat. I think we had a lot of questions. Guys, we're moving towards the end. Any more questions in there that you want to type in so that we can answer? And Joanna's saying that there's an absolutely valuable session. I agree with that. I'm going to put a little poll in here, guys. And to start a poll, I want to know what you would think of this workshop. Let me poll it. Let's see what you think. Did it deliver what you expected? Do you strongly disagree or strongly agree? Let's see what you poll, and then I'm going to publish it now. Let's see what you guys are saying.
Next time we should find a bottle for everybody, and before the class, we'll courier it to everybody's house so we can all drink together.
I think that's one of the best ideas. I think a lot of people will register for the next webinar if they get a bottle of wine now. Mira says she's thirsty now. The poll is, well, it's at 100% at the moment, and so everybody is like in full agreement. It's a great session. Guys, I'm also sharing a quick file about the rest of the program. So for all the things that we're doing the rest of the week for you guys to have a look at. Let's see. Oh, Emma is sending a private message. She's on Malta. Sharing is caring, so she's on her way. And Annette says, where are you, Malta? We're on the way. Lisette is asking you, saying, that's so informative. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
The poll is doing great. I think we had a great session. Thank you, everybody, for joining this one. Thank you as well for joining in the chat and being so with such great questions. I think that made the session. And Avnish is saying that you have to send him a six-pack. So Simone is thanking you. Tom is thirsty now. Listen, the chats are rolling in. We're going to record the session. It is recorded, so we're going to put a nice intro and outro, put it on our website and our social media for everybody to look back on it. I would say thank you, everybody. I'm waving at everybody down there. Stay safe.
Stay safe.
Stay safe and look after yourselves. Hopefully, we'll meet each other soon again in the flesh. Thank you again, guys.
Season.
And have a great season. Hopefully, we have a season. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.